All right, you guys. So we are going to be taking notes on the main dynasties of China, especially in regards to where we see the most progress of inventions and culture, etc. So while I am talking through the slideshow, it is your job to record what I am saying. The underlined portions need to go into the correct categories. You'll notice I've already typed the essential question here for you, and that we're only really focusing on the Tang and the Song dynasty. Now, any underlined information regarding the Tang can go here. Any information that is underlined regarding the Song dynasty goes here. So you'll want to pay attention to the titles of each of the slides. Now, remember with bullet points, all you need to do is type something, and then if you hit enter, it'll make a new or return. It'll make a new bullet point. If you would like it to kind of move over this way, if you hit the tab button, it sets up your bullet points to be in the order of which I have them on the slides. If you hit backspace, it gets rid of that bullet point and stuff like that. So this is what you are going to use to, again, take your notes. Excuse me. And then please don't forget that you do need to answer the summary in order to get full credit for the notes. And that's just answering the essential question in 2 to 3 complete sentences. So let's go ahead and take a look at our essential question. Our essential question today is, how did the Tang and Song dynasties gain and maintain power over people and territories? Now, you may notice that this has really been a common question I've asked you throughout the year. We looked at Rome. Rome gained and maintained power mainly through their money and the army, their military strength, and the fact that they were all united under a single law. And we just looked at the Islamic world. How did they gain and maintain power? Well, we see religion. They're all united under one religion. We see an organized government. We see, again, the military. The military is such a key factor. And so what I want you to take a look at is we have here the Tang dynasty in the 700s. And it's pretty widespread. I'd say that they're missing parts, on this side. Like they're not, the biggest empire in the world. But it is one of those things where you can see that the Tang dynasty did spread out through much of Asia. And then the Song dynasty is a lot smaller, honestly. It's just right here. It's the red portion, yet the Song dynasty was almost more impactful, in my opinion at least, than the Tang dynasty. And so what we're looking at is, how do we get to these places? How are they gaining their power? And then how are they keeping it over the people and territories that they control? So again, we're looking at these two dynasties of China, the Tang and the Song. The Tang dynasty, basically the Tang dynasty relied on what's called a bureaucracy. A bureaucracy is a government with many people. So it's the idea that when I go into, a government building, there is somebody to greet me at the door. And then they send me to the person at the front desk. The front desk sends me to the person at the elevator who's going to tell me what floor I need to go on. And when I get to that floor, there's somebody there to greet me. And then there's another person who's going to be there at the front desk there to tell me who I'm going to go see. And there's so many people because they're trying to be efficient and organized. There is no room, especially in China at this time, there's no room for error. So they're going to have somebody who's in charge of just the production of rice. They're going to have somebody who's in charge of the production of a certain coin. They're going to have somebody who's in charge of a specific town within a specific province, within a specific area, right? So you're talking about lots and lots of people within that government structure. And so these examples that we can see here is that, there were some officials who collect taxes. Other people see, building projects, irrigation projects, how do we get water from place to place? They provide for the army. They make sure laws are obeyed. We have a very intense government structure, especially in comparison to what we saw in the Islamic world and medieval Europe, right? Europe has, their kings, and then, the church is kind of there. They have, generally a government structure within the kingdom, but it's not half as intricate as we see in Asia or China at this time. The Tang dynasty used something called civil service exams to hire government officials. And so a civil service exam is basically a test that you take to prove that you are knowledgeable enough to work in the government. Today, to work for the state of California, you might have parents who do this, or cousins, or aunts, uncles, grandma, grandpa, maybe they work for the government. They've had to take a test to prove that they have the basic knowledge to work at that government level. And so what you'll see here is basically the Tang Dynasty is one of the first to implement this. It's not the first, but it's one of the first to implement the civil service exam. That kind of makes people so, hey, I can read, I can write, I know the laws, etc. The only problem is that it favors the wealthy, right? Only people with money get to go to school. People who don't have money are out working. That's how life just works at this time. And it kind of works to that today, right? People who are wealthy get, they pay for a specific school. Those people tend to have a better way to, get farther forward in the future in regards to their jobs. So a civil service exam is a good idea in the sense of, yes, qualified people are working in the government, but it still favors the wealthy. So the people in charge of the government are the ones with money. And unfortunately, under the Tang Dynasty, the tests were not open to everyone. Even if you saved up enough money to go and take the test, you were not allowed to do so if you did not hit a certain requirement. So merchants, actors, beggars, you're not allowed to take the test even if you could save up enough money to do so. And so basically, you guys, at the end of the day, it's a good idea for the civil service exam, but only the wealthy can afford to attend enough schooling to actually qualify to take the test. So at the end of the day, it's a way for the Tang Dynasty to make sure that the impoverished people or people outside of, their version of nobility, they're not allowed to be working in the government. So during the Tang Dynasty, northern China was the wealthiest and most prosperous area. This obviously means that they're going to be the target of attacks. So people from Mongolia were coming down and attacking northern China on a regular basis because, again, they're the wealthiest and most prosperous. They have the best, crops. They have the more, best trading system. They have all the money. And so people from Mongolia are coming down and they're continually attacking the northern Chinese because they want to take what they have. And so northern China did grow wheat and millet, just another kind of grain. And what's interesting is that even though they have this area that's constantly being attacked, there are very few restrictions on trade during the Tang Dynasty. They still let everybody in, let everybody out, did their thing, right? Even though that they were under attack in those areas where trade would be flourishing because it is the wealthy area, right? There's just very few restrictions on trade. So there's no rules regarding it. The Tang Dynasty was known for selling rice, silk, tea, jade, and porcelain along the trade routes to India, Arabia, the Arabian Peninsula, and Europe. So, AKA, that is going to be code for the Silk Road. So, along the Silk Road from China, from the Tang Dynasty at least, you're going to see rice, silk, tea, jade, and porcelain coming out of the Tang Dynasty into areas like India, Arabia, and Europe. There weren't a lot of urban areas. There were not a lot of cities in the Tang Dynasty. So you're looking at primarily a farming culture with your local leader who's in charge of that area, reporting back to whoever is next up in the bureaucracy, that government structure with a lot of people. And basically, this is because more people were needed as farmers. When you have a large population, you need to grow enough food to feed that population. And so even though they did have cities, the cities were not that crowded because people were needed as farmers in a day-to-day basis for survival. The Song Dynasty kind of sees a pretty big change. Now, you notice that the Tang Dynasty was in the 700s. The Song Dynasty, we're looking at 1142. So we're jumping ahead here quite a bit. Now, the Song Dynasty, rather than necessarily being just a bureaucracy, people who could get hired, it was ruled by a meritocracy. A meritocracy means that you are hired on merit. You guys, this means I have had to prove I am good at my job in order to get it. So, for example, as a teacher, I had to go to college and get a degree in history. Then I had to go to another year of college and get a degree for being a teacher. And then together, I've been able to prove, okay, look, I have my credential for teaching and I have my degree in history. Therefore, I can be a history teacher, right? I have earned that. I'm hired on my merit. They're not going to hire me to teach English. They're not going to hire me to teach math. That was the case, we'd all fail. And basically, it's because I have merit in my specific subject. So the Song Dynasty has the same idea. They're going to be ruled by meritocracy. People who are good at certain things will work in those areas. And as a result, which is really awesome, is that the Song Dynasty actually opens up the civil service exams to more people. Instead of having to be wealthy, you could literally be the beggar on the street. And if you're able to go in and prove that you are knowledgeable about something, you could technically be hired by the government. This is because their exams were influenced by Neo-Confucianism, which is basically a form of teaching that takes the teachings of a man named Confucius, who is very famous. I'm sure you guys have heard of him already. And they combine it with Buddhism and Taoism. All of these ideas, basically, it just means, you guys, we have a system of respect. We have a system of understanding how to behave in regards to our relationship with other people. So I will be respectful to my parents. My parents will be respectful to their parents. I will honor my teacher. My teacher will honor me as a student. And so they're basically exams that are very forward thinking, and essentially the idea of, do you know who you are in the society? Do you know what is expected of you? And do you understand what others expect to be given, right? Like, if I meet somebody in the street and I understand their social status, what should I be doing? And so it was very organized. The Song Dynasty tried to be very organized, very efficient in regards to their behavior as well as their government. The most important idea, again, of Neo-Confucianism under these exams especially, was that people must act properly in all relationships. And so you have a respect for every level of society, not just the wealthy. People of lower classes in the Song Dynasty were able to become officials. You guys, this was so exciting. This meant it did not matter if you were rich or poor. Everybody had a chance to work as an official. And if you were able to do that, it meant that you were able to raise your family from poverty. So the only thing is that people were actually, if you were hired by the government, you were given a job far from your hometown. And that was basically because they didn't want you to have any favoritism. So for example, let's say I'm from this town here. I can't quite read it because my glasses are a little out of date, but I can't read, but we're from this town. If I get hired, I'm going to actually be over here working in this town, because that way I don't know anybody. I can't say, oh, I'm going to give my best friend Sally the best cup of rice this time round, because you know what, I really like her, or that dude was mean to me in high school, so I'm going to make sure he has to pay extra on his taxes. There was none of that. There was very little government corruption. At least that was the idea. The idea was that there would be less government corruption because the people hired to do the jobs not only were hired on merit, aka they were good at it. They knew how to act, but they also didn't know anybody, so you can't have any favoritism when you are hired to be part of the Song Dynasty's government. The benefits of being part of the meritocracy was that you did not have to pay taxes or serve in the military. And just for those of us who know about Marco Polo, he was a famous traveler way back when. This is the dynasty that Marco Polo saw. When he came to China, he was able to observe the Song Dynasty and then report back to Europe. He sold a lot of books. Under the Song Dynasty, we see a lot of agricultural changes, so our changes in farming. This is primarily because farmers are moving to the fertile basins of a specific river within southern China. So instead of farming in northern China, where it was profitable under the Tang Dynasty, we're going to move to southern China, where we see more water, which means better soil. Now, under the Song Dynasty, they grew a lot of rice. This is because in the 11th century, so the 1000s, there's a new kind of rice that is brought to China. And this is incredibly important, you guys. I promise you this will be on quiz questions. It'll be test questions, might pop up on your final exam. You need to remember this. There's a new kind of rice brought to China in the 11th century. And this new form of plant is resistant to drought. Rice, for anybody who knows anything about rice, it has to be grown in very wet conditions. And so technically, if you drive around Sacramento here, you can see the rice fields where it looks like they're flooded all the time. There's plants coming out of this water, but there's, a lot of standing water. That's because rice needs that water. Rice needs to have that standing water in order to grow. Well, there's this new kind of rice that does not actually need as much water. So if you have a bad year with no rain, your rice crop is not going to die. In fact, it's resistant to drought. It's going to flourish just as well as it would have if it actually had access to water. And so because it's resistant to drought and it grows faster, it grew in 2 months instead of 5, you see that there's this huge change in the ability of farmers to grow enough food for the people to eat. So this rice is resistant to drought. It doesn't need that much water. It grows in 2 months instead of 5. And basically, throw in some great farming tools that are a lot better than, a stick and a rock. We see that the production of this crop is going to increase exponentially. So the effects of this are that the increased food production means that a larger population can't survive. You guys, your people are only going to flourish if you have several things. Most importantly, food. Everyone needs food. You need water, and you need some form of safety. Other than that, civilizations can kind of go whichever direction from there. What we see here is that in Asia, under the Song Dynasty, more people can live, more people can have children, more people, actually become adults, right? Children have a very large death rate early on in our history because there's not that great a medicine. But more importantly, it's because they have food. So children are actually going to have food. They're not going to die from starvation. They're not going to die from malnourishment. And so you're going to have a larger and larger population because you have enough food to do so. So because of that, we actually don't need as many farmers because this crop does not require 12 farmers, it requires one. So one dude now does the work of 12 people, and those peasants who used to be farmers can now make silk and cotton instead of farming. And so you're going to see an increase in productivity under the Song Dynasty. Not only do they have more food, but now they have more silk, more cotton to sell, instead of having to limit themselves to just farming. And so you're going to see the culture itself kind of increase in a way where they can start spending more time on the arts, which you don't normally get to do if you're just struggling to survive. Trade increases, obviously, because people are growing more and more wealthy. They're making money off of rice, they're making money off of silk and cotton. And as people get wealthier, the happier they are. Now, we need to talk about how this affects trade and commerce. So remember that trade had no restrictions under the Tang Dynasty. There were no rules regarding trade and what you could and could not do. Now, in the Song Dynasty, trade was really helped by water transportation. You guys traveling by water is faster, it's often safer, and you're able to do it pretty, quickly and efficiently. So again, it was cheaper to do this. It was faster to travel by water than the road. And so people start to do this much more under the Song Dynasty than they did in previous dynasties. And that's because under the Song Dynasty, they had great navigation systems. They understood where they were going. There's better maps. There's better understanding of how to work their waterways in a way that allowed them to travel from place to place. And because of this, they actually need to create a better sense of what money is. So they create more currency during this time because, the wealthier you are, the more money you have. And eventually, you don't want to have 100 $1 bills. You'd rather have just $100 bill, and that saves you some space. So it's the same idea with coins, right? The more money we earn, the more kinds of change that we need in order to make it more efficient. Paper money became common under the Song Dynasty. So this is one of the first times we start to see paper money arrive in our history. It's kind of weird for us today because I'm sure you guys grew up in the age of credit cards, but I remember being little and it was like, if you found $1, it was amazing. So we've kind of gone to like plastic money, but remember way back when there was actual paper money that was much more common, you always had to have paper money on you. It kind of goes back to the Song Dynasty in China. Now, the effects of this, that cheaper and faster way of traveling, having more money, etc., we see that the merchant class is going to grow. The merchant class becomes very busy. Remember, the peasants used to all be farmers, but then we have people who no longer need to farm. So they're going to become part of that merchant class. The merchant class is going to grow. They're the middle class. They're not the wealthiest of the wealthy, but they're not the poorest of the poor either because there's so much money going around in the Song Dynasty that they're able to actually gain more people in that middle class, that merchant class. And so at this time, China basically had the highest standard of living in the world because they have so much money going around. Most people in China at this time, I'm not going to say everyone because there's always the poor that we, forget to look at, especially in history. But we can see is that China had really a great way of spending your life. And if you were in China, the chances are that you were probably doing pretty well, which is much more you can say than medieval Europe. Those trade centers that used to kind of just be like, a city with no people, they become giant cities. We see people start to flock to the cities, in general, because you're not needed on the farm anymore, so now you can move to the city. And so you're going to see that the urban areas actually become a lot busier with an increased population. So that means urbanization is going to increase. Remember, urban means city life, rural is country life. So urbanization is going to increase. Becomes much safer and easier to move to the city during the Song Dynasty, again, because the need for farmers is smaller. If you don't need farmers in the country, that means people can move to the city and do whatever job that they're good at or whatever job that they want. And the streets become filled with landowners, merchants, traders, money lenders, visiting peasants. Basically, everybody is in these cities. And so they're very busy. They're very noisy, and they're probably filled with all kinds of different peoples, shouting in the streets trying to sell their goods. Walking down the street, you could actually buy silk, silver, pearls, food, fans, porcelain, really anything that you could possibly think of. You could buy in a city at this time, which is again, it's very advanced, right? This is something where, medieval Europe in the 1100s, guys, is still in feudalism. Peasants are still, tied to the land as serfs. We see kings and queens have, money and jewels, but then nobody else does, right? That's what Europe is like. Instead, if you go over to China, they're a bustling city. They're very advanced. And even if you're a peasant, you can actually have enough money to go buy some good stuff for yourself. Now, the effects of this are that the cities are obviously very crowded. We see that public works projects, though, are giving people a lot of jobs. So again, as a peasant, if I don't want to be a farmer, I don't have to be. If I move to the city, if I go to the area of urbanization, I am able to get a job as somebody who is, building a wall or digging irrigation systems or maybe building boats, whatever it is. There's plenty of jobs for people to have, and they're run by that meritocracy. And then the culture itself is going to grow. And that's because people are wealthy and they have time. So we see an increase in art and writing and poetry. You guys, the Song Dynasty is like the most famous dynasty for the artwork that comes out of it. And so it's because when people are wealthy enough and they have the time to sit there and create something, we know it's been a good time in history. People are not creative in times of absolute struggle. And it's simply because you don't have the time to be. You don't have the ability to do so because you're trying to survive. Well, in the Song Dynasty, people were not having to struggle to survive. They were easily able to get what they needed. And so therefore they have the time to make things like art and, poetry and plays and all kinds of stuff. And so again, this is where we see the finest paintings in the world are actually produced during this time period in the Song Dynasty. Now, the cities were a lot larger than Europe. And so there's a quote from Marco Polo here. He was a European who went over to China and stayed there for a few years. He wrote a book when he came back. And basically, he said, anyone seeing such a multitude would believe it impossible that food could be found to feed them all. And yet, on every market day, all the market squares are filled with people and with merchants who bring food on carts and boats. Basically, Marco Polo was like, look, you look at this and it's insane. Like it seems like, there's so many people, it's impossible that they'd ever be able to feed everyone. And yet they're very easily able to do so. So again, he's focused on that fact that, no matter what, you may think, looking at this, horde of a city, they're doing great. They are able to take care of all their people, and it doesn't matter how many people there are. They're always ready to do so. And again, that is very rare for this time, right? Medieval Europe is still, they're not doing great. They're not very advanced. And then, the Islamic world is starting off, right? They're a little bit in their early creation mode, and they're going to become just as advanced as China was. But they're still maybe struggling with food production simply because of the area in which they live. So they're relying more on trade, whereas China is just very self-sufficient. They're making everything that they need. They're growing everything they need to grow. And you can see that they are doing really well. So what I want you to do is think about how the Tang and Song dynasties were kind of similar yet different, and how they were able to gain their power, getting their power, and then how they were able to keep their power over the people and territories. Please answer your essential question in 2 to 3 complete sentences. If you don't do so, you get a C on the notes, and come on, guys, these are just super easy points. Again, remember, you can pause the video whenever you need, watch it multiple times. There will be a quiz, and best of luck to you.